I feel a little self-conscious about practicing in front of everybody when most authors get, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 13 books to practice on before it's all out in front of everybody. But it's also exciting to have gone through the process that quickly and unexpectedly. Today I want to respond to a couple of my readers who have now also become my viewers. Both Alicia Hurst and Risa Nyman were kind enough to ask if I would share my story about how I became published. To be honest, I'm a little bit nervous about talking about this because it's not a typical path to publication for most authors, and I'm a little anxious about how it might be received by some people. But I'm going to go ahead and share it anyway. Just bear with me if I seem a little nervous, because I actually am. Here's how it went down. Like most authors, I have always loved stories. I've loved reading them, I've loved making them up, I've loved listening to other people's stories, both the fictional ones and the real ones. I just love stories. But I took a different path when I went to college. I studied illustration, which I guess is a different kind of storytelling, but I didn't study creative writing very much. I did take a short story class during college, and then after I graduated, I took a poetry class. But that's about the extent of my formal writing education. So I went off in other directions. And then, like I mentioned in my 5 Things About Me video, about 9 years ago, I had a stroke. There was no circulation in the right side of my brain. I had a hemorrhage between spatial processing and visual processing. I'm fine, I'm good now, but back in the early days, right after the stroke, I wasn't able to do all of the things that I had been able to do before that. I was in the process of homeschooling my kids, and other than that, I spent a lot of time just sitting at the computer playing silly little video games like Bejeweled, because doing anything that required moving around in a spatial environment, which is, the 3D environment that we all live in, it was exhausting. I had a hard time judging where I was in space, and so everything took more focus, everything took more energy, and it was exhausting to move around in space. And so I just sat a lot in front of my computer. And after a while, that started making me feel kind of bad about myself, because I was just sitting there playing these silly games and not really accomplishing anything. And so I decided for my sanity's sake, I needed to come up with something that I could do while I was sitting there that would put something into the world that was, I don't know, new or changed or different. Something that I could feel like something was different because I was alive in the world still, right? And so I kind of went down the list in my head of all of the things that I've always wanted to do with my life. And I'm the kind of person that has kind of a long list of those things, like, I don't know, skydiving and archaeology and snorkeling. And although I didn't do that when I had the opportunity, I feel bad about that. But I have this list, spelunking. But all of these things require spatial judgment. And I didn't think that I could do any of those things. I could maybe have studied them in school, but because I was homeschooling, I felt like I was already cramming all the time to stay ahead of my kids. And so I didn't really want to go back to school. So I've always thought it would be fun to write a book. I like to read books, and I've always thought it would be fun to write one. And so, even if it's not a good book, I can at least put some words together into sentences, and some sentences into paragraphs, and paragraphs into chapters that didn't exist, yesterday. And then I will at least feel like I've done something. I've done something besides 300 more levels of Bejeweled. So I decided now is the time. I'm going to write a book. And I had made some sort of half-hearted efforts at writing a book before. Like, I don't think I ever made it past the first chapter, but I had kind of made a couple of efforts in that direction and realized that I didn't know enough about how to write a novel to do it. And so while I was doing homeschool stuff, I had studied writing a little bit, just because it was one of those dreams. It was something I might want to do one day, and I knew I didn't know enough about it to do it. So I had read some books about writing, especially about story structure, because that was one of the places I realized that I was falling down in my previous attempts at trying my hand at the first chapter of a novel. But this time I was serious. I was going to write all the way to the end of the book and just see if I could do it, just see if I had enough words in me to get an entire story that was long enough to be a novel. And I had the time because I was sitting in front of the computer doing nothing, essentially. And so I started writing. I came up with a plot, and I came up with some characters that I thought that I would enjoy spending some time with. And actually, if you would like to know my reasoning for picking these particular characters and this particular plot for my first book, I would be happy to talk about that. I think it would make this video a little too long, but let me know in the comments if you're interested. Anyway, I started writing, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and then I got to the end of the story and I went, wow, this really is long enough it could be a novel. In fact, it's actually too long, because I looked up how on Google how long are novels usually, and it wasn't really too long to be a novel, but it was too long to be a first novel. Publishers don't want to take a chance on a first novel that has a really narrow profit margin, and so paper costs money, and ink costs money, and typesetting costs money, and so the longer your book is, the less the profit margin is, because you can't really sell a 800-page book for very much more than a 400-page book, but there's twice as much cost going into making the book, right? So anyway, other story, but it was too long, and I thought I need to split this, and I need to shorten it or something. And so I went through it, and I tightened things up, and I cut as much as I could figure out how to cut, and it was still too long, but it was a pretty good story. There was something about it that was still not quite working, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Like, I knew it was just not quite there yet, but like, no matter, I was at the point where I was just rearranging commas and not really, it was different, but it wasn't better, and I didn't know what to do, because I had read books about creative writing, but I had never really taken classes, and I had gotten to the point where I was stuck. I didn't know how to make it better. And so I thought, I will run this past some reader friends of mine and see if they have any thoughts about what bugs them about it, and maybe they can point me in the right direction. But what I really needed was someone who knew writing, someone who had some experience to like mentor me just a little bit and tell me, point me in a direction. And I knew exactly one published author that I knew well enough that I could maybe approach with that kind of a request. So I wound up my courage, and I did. I called her up and I said, so I've written this book, and I can tell that this story's not working. It's broken in some way, and I can't quite figure out how to fix it. And I wondered if you might be willing to look at my story and kind of give me some guidance into what I can do to make it better. And she was so kind. But she had had a lot of these requests from beginning authors before, and she told me that she wasn't taking on projects like that right now. She needed to focus on her own writing, and so she wasn't doing reading for people, at least not for beginning authors, just her critique partners that she already had established. And I could totally respect that. But she said that because she knew me, and we were kind of friends, we were more friendly acquaintances at the time. We've gotten to be really good friends since then, but at the time I would say it was more of a friendly acquaintances kind of situation. We knew each other in the neighborhood. But because she knew me, she said she would be willing to take a look at my first chapter and kind of see if she could see anything that she could tell me that I could work on. And so I said, yes, please. I would really appreciate any kind of help from any source that I can get at this point, because I don't know what's wrong with this story. I can just tell it's not quite working, and I don't know who else to ask. So I gave it to her. I gave her the manuscript, and I gave it to a couple of other friends of mine who are avid readers, and I thought that they might have some insights into what I could do to fix this story. And a couple of days later, I heard back from my author friend, And she said, I read your story. And I said, the whole thing? And she said, yes, the whole thing. It turned out she had strep, I think it was, and she had to stay home for a couple of days, and she didn't have anything to do, so she read my story. She said once she got started writing, she couldn't, reading, once she got started reading, she couldn't stop, and it just pulled her all the way through, and she just so much enjoyed my story. I said, that is fantastic. What's broken? How do I fix it? She said, well, it's kind of long, and I said, yeah, it's probably going to have to be split, but I'm not sure where to split it. And she said, well, we could probably talk about that if you want to, but I just really enjoyed this story so much, and I have this friend who is an agent who's looking for new authors to take on, and I think she would really enjoy this story. And I think you should send it to her, and you can give her my name and tell her that I sent you. And I thought, this book is not ready for an agent. It's broken. This story is broken, and I don't know how to fix it. I can't send it to an agent until it's working, right? If I even want to send it to an agent, like, I was seeing if I could write a book. I wasn't really aiming at publication yet. I thought, you know, if I can write a book, nobody's first book ever gets published. It's just a practice book. It's kind of a throwaway. I'm just having fun with this practice book to see if I can learn how to write a book. I thought, you know, maybe 3 or 4 more books down the road, I'll write something that's worth submitting once I can figure out how to fix broken stories. But I didn't know who else to get help from. I talked to my reader friends. They both really enjoyed the story. They had some favorite moments in the story, which really helped me know what not to cut. And they were both very enthusiastic and also very encouraging. But they didn't really know how to fix it either. So I thought, I don't know who else to ask. If I send it to my friend's agent friend, maybe she will take pity on me because I'm a friend of her friend, and she will not just say, you know, thank you, it doesn't suit my needs at this time, and, you know, leave it at that, like rejection letters usually are. Maybe she will be kind enough to give me a little bit more detailed response. You know, your work is promising, but you need to work on this and this and this before it's going to be ready for publication. That's what I was hoping for. Instead, 2 weeks after I sent it to her, she called me and offered me a contract, which bowled me over. I wasn't quite sure what to do with that, but she did say that she would work with me on the story. I said, but the story's broken. It's not working. And she said, well, it's so close, and I will work with you on it, and we can whip it into shape. And so I thought, I want to fix this story, and if all of these people are excited about my story, maybe I should start taking it seriously too. So I worked with this agent. She gave me some ideas, and I pulled some things apart. I split the book. I expanded the first part and put a new ending on it, because the place to split it, the logical place to split the book, was not halfway through or close to the end. It was like a third of the way through, and it wasn't enough to be a book by itself. So I expanded on that. I gave it an ending, and I resubmitted it to the agent, and she started shopping it around to publishers. And I thought, I'm not really sure that I like the way this book ends still, but I don't know how to make it better. So maybe she'll find an editor at a publisher somewhere who will take pity on me and say, this author shows some promise, but she really needs to work on this and this and this before she'll be ready to be published. And that would at least give me a direction to move in. So we got some rejections, but several of them weren't the standard boilerplate rejections from them either. There was actually one that made an offer. They wanted me to change a major aspect of the story that I felt was very central to the story itself, and so I didn't want to change that, just to have a publication contract. And so I turned them down, which is a really cheeky thing for a first-time author to do, but I did. And there were a couple of other publishers that said that they really liked the characters, they liked the storyline, but it doesn't fit neatly into a genre category, and so it's going to be really hard to market, so they passed on it. And I heard that a couple of times. But this was all kind of exciting, and I mean really exciting and kind of surreal, and I really didn't expect anyone to publish this book. because it was my practice book, right? And so I started writing a second book. I always thought that I would like to write in science fiction or fantasy. The first book is now the beginning of my Viper series, but I didn't want to get pigeonholed into science fiction before I even tried fantasy. So I decided to write a book about dragons to see if I liked writing dragons better than I liked writing aliens, because I wanted to try them both. And so I wrote Dragon Ascending, and I sent that to my agent, and she started shopping that around, and publishers started expressing interest in that one as well. I was floored, yet again, that people were taking my writing so seriously. Meanwhile, I had joined a writing group that had several pretty successful authors in it, and they taught me a lot about writing, which I needed. I still have room for growth, absolutely. But one of the ladies in this writing group was a very successful self-published author, and because my books didn't necessarily fit super neatly into genre categories, Dragon Ascending does a lot more than the Viper books do, because I actually thought people might be interested in publishing Dragon Ascending, so I aimed for the genre category a lot better with that one. Anyway, my new friend encouraged me to think about self-publishing, because some of these between genre books do better in the self-publishing space than in the traditional publishing space. And that sounded kind of overwhelming too, but the more I heard her talk about it and the more I learned about self-publishing, the more I thought, I don't know, do I want to self-publish, or do I want to traditionally publish with an agent and an editor and a publisher? Do I want to maybe consider self-publishing? And so what I wound up doing was thinking, well, I tried sci-fi and I tried fantasy and I liked them both. Maybe I'll try self-publishing and traditional publishing if anyone picks my book up. And then I will be able to get a feel for both of those and know which of those I would prefer as well. And so I decided that whichever book got picked up by a publisher, first I would traditionally publish, and then I would maybe try self-publishing the other book. And it all went kind of quickly. After Dragon Ascending went out on submissions, I had 3 different publishers that had an interest in publishing. One eventually decided not to because of the age of my characters, which puts it out of the YA category a little bit. They're too old for YA, but it's kind of a storyline that you would typically see in a YA genre. But the other 2 both made offers, which was very flattering and a little overwhelming. The one that made the offer first, we started negotiating what would the contract be, and then the other offer came in, and I already had this one contract on the table, and I didn't know which of the 2 publishers that I would prefer. They were both small publishers, which I actually appreciated at the time because, like I said, I was still homeschooling my kids. They have some special needs, and it wouldn't have worked just to put them back in school, and I didn't have the bandwidth to have a big author career, so it was nice to me that we were looking at these smaller publishers. But so we had one contract on the table. I could have signed it and just gone. We ended up doing a little more negotiating, but so when the other offer came in, they wanted some changes to the story, and I wasn't necessarily opposed to changes to the story, but like one of the changes was a thing that I had already tried, and it kind of broke some other things in the story, and they wanted me to make the ending more final, which the first publisher that we were already negotiating with wanted to talk about sequels. So I didn't really want to just end it if there was a publisher that was interested in sequels. So I found myself in this whole milieu of negotiating contracts when I didn't know anything very much about the publishing world. So I was cramming to learn about the industry and negotiate contracts and things. And I decided that I would see what this second publisher did with a little pushback. So I wrote kind of an explanation about why I did things the way that I did, and explained that I would be very happy to listen to whatever changes they might suggest, but I tried this, and this is why I didn't do it that way, and I would prefer to leave it more open-ended so that there can be some sequels and things like that. And I thought, if they get back to me with some good feedback about what would make this book better, I might be willing to go with them over this other publisher that already had a contract. But they when they got back to me, it was, well, we seem to have a different vision for this book than each other, so we're going to pass. And that was okay, because I didn't really want to be with a publisher that was, my way or the highway in that way. I want feedback. I want to make my books better, but I want to have some flexibility there where it's a two-way discussion. And so I was very happy to sign with Immortal Works, the publisher that I did, and I've enjoyed working with them. And then I decided to self-publish the Viper books to see if I liked self-publishing. So I actually wound up hiring an editor to work with me on that one, and I took off the ending that I didn't really like, and we fixed it some more. I'm happy with how it is now, and it's out in the world where people can read it. It still in some ways feels like a practice book to me, but I need more practice because I haven't written very many books yet, and so I'm happy to keep practicing. I feel a little self-conscious about practicing in front of everybody when most authors get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 13 books under their belt to practice on before it's all out in front of everybody. But it's also exciting to have gone through the process that quickly and unexpectedly. It doesn't happen that way for most authors, and I want to say to other authors out there that I am fully cognizant that this is not a standard path to publication. And for those of you out there who are putting so much time and effort and work into getting to be published authors, I want you to know that I see you, and I have so much respect for you. And I wish you all the best in your pursuits. I somewhat envy authors who have several years to practice and to learn the industry before they get thrown into the middle of it. And I know that there are people who would probably envy my path to publication. I think that both of those paths have, again, positives and negatives, like pretty much everything else. But I'm glad to be where I am, and I'm grateful to all of the people who got me here, from my writer friend to her agent friend to the publishers that encouraged me, even with their rejections, and especially to my readers. It's been a very educational experience. It's been a very gratifying experience to have people, readers out, in the wild, come back and tell me that my books meant something to them, that they made a difference in their lives. I don't think that there's anything better than that for someone who makes up stories than to be told that your stories make a difference to somebody. So, for my readers who have picked me up, even though I'm an unknown author from a small publisher, thank you so much for taking a chance on me. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your reviews. I appreciate your willingness to give me a chance. And I hope that there will be many more books in the future. I don't know yet whether I prefer self-publishing or traditional publishing. There are things about both of them that I really like, and there are some drawbacks to both of them. And so I don't know which way I will push for more in the future. There's a lot that I don't have control over, which I also recognize. My agent is no longer agenting. She had some life changes and went a different direction. So at some point I'm going to need to find a new agent. Right now, though, I'm going to finish out, the plan is at least to finish out the Viper series, self-publishing it, and to finish out the Dragon series with my current publisher. And so there's not a lot to to send to an agent. So that'll be a new and exciting bridge when I come to cross it. But that's my story. That's how I got published. It was unexpected. It was exciting. It was kind of overwhelming. I'm grateful for the people who have helped me along the road, and I hope to see you again soon in more videos.